So first things first. So identity. So who are you? So Abby, who are you?
I'm Abby. What do you want to know?
Yeah, when we're asked about ourselves, right, we're always just like, I'm a human, right? What else can I say? But we identify ourselves mainly by our name, right? I'm Abby, or I'm Bryn, or I'm Peyton, or I'm Kylie, or I'm insert whatever name here I have. Or here's my nickname, call me by that. And we identify ourselves by sometimes our middle names or our last names, like I belong to this family. So who are we and how do we become that way? So our identities are created through communication. Have you guys heard the story of like the feral children? Okay, let me pull that up if you haven't. So if my internet's gonna work. So feral children, so in this case, kid ended up in the forest, or neglected and abused, finding more comfort from animals than people, lived with dogs for 6 years, but no human interaction. Yes, yeah, to an extent. But the thing is, these people, like these feral children, they have no identity. They can't speak a language. They can't interact with other human beings. They have no sense of self because they have no way to communicate with other people, or they just haven't in the past. They have no one to tell them, it's like, oh, you're so funny, or you're so pretty, or you're so athletic, or whatever it takes to create our identity. So, they're 8, 10 years old and they have to be taught from scratch how to be human. And this is the same with anyone, except, when we're raised normally, we're taken home from the hospital by our parents. And then, we're raised by parents, grandparents, we have friends, we interact in society, and we become human. We become who we are. We create Demi Hauser, or we create Brent, I just totally forgot your last name, Brigtrup, something like that, yeah. But it's created through interacting with other people. You cannot create an identity in isolation. You had to have other people there to help you form it. It's created in spurts. So, yeah, what is normal? Yeah, not everyone is always normal, Brianna, but quote unquote average, I guess. But it's created in spurts, so it happens at different times. We might have something happen to us that becomes an integral part of our identity. Maybe we were playing, a baseball game when we were 10 or 11, and we got our first home run. And that is something that we have put into our identity, saying, no, I'm a baseball player. But that happens because of a certain incident. And these can be positive or extremely negative. You can have traumatic events that affect your identity and who you think you are. Our identities are multiple. So if we say, okay, well, I know me, so I'm going to use me as an example. So if we have this identity of Kylie, am I just a teacher? No, that's just like, one little aspect of my personality. So like I also play, D&D. I also like to garden. What else do I like to do? I don't know. I'm not very interesting. I have, cats instead of kids or whatever else. So there's multiple identities. I'm not just one thing. Same with, if you're a sports player, you're not just an athlete. Or if you're married, you're not just a husband or a wife. There's other, facets to you. They are influenced by society. So how we identify what identities we create is influenced by the society in which we live. So if I grew up, here in Thatcher, Arizona, maybe part of my identity wouldn't be, single, unmarried woman. Because had I grown up here, maybe I would have been married at this point. If I grew up in Canada, maybe instead of gardening, I would like something else. Because depending on where I am in Canada, it might be really hard to grow stuff. If I grew up in Germany, I would definitely probably wear socks with sandals more. Or is that a stereotype? Or if I was an athlete, I do it, because I see a lot of athletes do that too. But it's dynamic, so it's always changing. So it changes depending on different contexts. So, when Demi gets out onto the softball diamond, technically, her identity goes from, a student to a softball player, because that's the context in which that matters. When you go to church or whatever, your identity goes from just being a normal person or, a person outside of church to someone with a religious identity. When you get married, your identity goes from being single to married. And it's developed in different ways in different cultures. So depending on which culture you are in or grew up in, you can develop different identities during different parts of your life in different ways than you would, growing up in the US or growing up in Mexico or China. So kind of expanding a little bit more on those. So created through communication. So how do we come to understand who we are? Well, that feral children example of we can't understand who we are unless we have other people to look at and reflect on. So looking at our looking glass self, comparing it to everyone else. So, maybe I'm not as athletic as the basketball players or the volleyball players or the softball players or whatever, but that doesn't mean, I'm not athletic in some other way. Or it doesn't mean I'm not good at something else. Does everyone see us as we see ourselves? I probably see myself very differently than you guys do, because you see me pretty much only in a professional context. You might see me at Walmart or whatever in passing, but you guys don't know what I do on the weekends. Like, you don't see me when I'm down over in Phoenix or if I'm at home in Kansas. You have no idea who I am outside of Eastern Arizona College. But our identities are created when we are exchanging messages. And these can be obviously positive or negative. Hence why bullying is a thing, because if you're constantly telling someone, oh, you're such a piece of crap, or you're ugly, or you're too short, or you're not good at insert whatever here, people repeat that to themselves, and eventually, if it's repeated enough, it can become part of the way that they see themselves. But they're negotiated, co-created, reinforced, and challenged through communication. So if you think you're a really funny person, because everyone always laughs at your joke, the day when someone doesn't laugh at your joke and everyone's like, come on, really, that's not funny, your identity as the funny person is going to be challenged by people's reactions to you. Like we said really briefly, different identities are emphasized depending on with whom we're communicating, what the conversation is about, and the context of it. So if you guys are asking me about academic stuff, my academic identity is going to be, emphasized. It's going to be at the forefront. I'm going to be in teacher mode. If you're asking me how my weekend was, or, how I liked the Lakers game or whatever, a different identity is going to be emphasized. How'd you feel about that Super Bowl? Screams in rage. Tom Brady. And then something to kind of think about too is, we're all the technology generation, right? I don't think anyone here is above 30. Well, maybe on Zoom, but no one here in the classroom is above 30. But how do our mobile communication technologies, so like our cell phones, being able to use like Instagram and Tumblr and TikTok and Facebook, and I don't know what other kids use these days. Did I ever say Instagram? I don't know, Twitter. How do those influence our relationships and sense of identity? Because our sense of identity, who we are, comes from our relationships. Obviously, it feels really nice to get on Instagram and post a picture of ourselves and get all those comments where they're like, hey, you're looking great today. You know, it's emphasizing our identity of, you know, an attractive person. Or if we post a picture of us at like the basketball game or whatever, it's like, hey, you know, you guys played great tonight. Good job. You know, emphasizing that athletic and you guys did a great job. We want to keep that up. Identity. So far, is this making sense? I feel like I'm kind of talking fast. But I guess the basic gist of what we said so far is you cannot create an identity in isolation. You have to have other people there to negotiate it with you, create it with you, reinforce it, and then challenge it. Because if you don't have that, then it's just not going to get made. They're created in spurts, so it's not a orderly, smooth process. You know, you don't just go through your life, you know, every step you take every day, just being like, oh, this is a new part of me, this is a new part of me. It happens a lot during just specific events. So most of the time, we're not really thinking about our identity, right? We don't wake up in the morning and have an existential crisis, except maybe every so often. Sage, you're kind of like smirking like at least twice a year. I feel you right there. But certain events happen and help us realize who we are, you know, and who we want to be. You know, maybe we go through a really bad breakup and that helps us realize, you know, this is the kind of person that I want to be, or this is the kind of person I don't want to be, or this is the kind of person I don't want to be with, and help us learn more about ourselves. But most of the time, we're not thinking about who we are, and you know, we kind of think of like, yeah, we know who we are. You know, I'm Kylie, I'm a teacher, I go to work, I teach, I grade, and then I go home and I do my personal stuff. But, you know, other times we may be confused as to who we are, who we want to be. You know, if you have a really bad day at work, you know, let's say I have a really bad day at work, no one shows up to class, you know, everyone's acting like they'd really rather be like, you know, in an Iron Maiden than sitting in the chair. You know, that might make me feel kind of crap about myself as a teacher and say, do I really want to be doing this job? Do I really want to go into a place where it seems like I'm not valued and that people don't care about, you know, what they're doing or what I have to say? But then you still get up the next day and go back to work and say, well, I'm doing it anyways. You know, our identities are multiple. So we belong to various groups. Like I said, we're not just an athlete, or we're not just a student. We're not just, you know, a gardener or a rock collector, or insert whatever here people do in their free time. So we highlight our different identities at different times. So if you go to church or temple, you're highlighting your religious identity, saying, I belong to this group. Or if you wear religious jewelry, so if you have like a temple necklace or a CTR ring, you're highlighting that religious identity. If you wear the Star of David, you are highlighting your identity. If you wear a cross, that is your religious identity. Depending on what kind of clubs or bars you go to. So if you go down to Tucson and go to the LGBTQ bars, you may be highlighting your sexual orientation identity, saying, I belong to this group. If you are in particular social groups, you might be highlighting your gender identity. So like the Masons and stuff, brotherhoods, fraternities, only men can belong to those. So if they are part of that group, they are highlighting their gender identity. If you have a women's group, like Relief Society, highlighting both your religious and your gender identity. If you're Daughters of the American Revolution, that's a group for women, highlighting that gender identity. They're influenced by society. So depending on the social context of where you live, you might not want to highlight certain identities you have, like political identities. During the election time, you might not want to admit that you're with one party or the other, right? Depending on how the race is going. I see you nodding back there, Demi, like, yep. Particularly if you're in a place that is small and either extremely liberal or extremely conservative. If you are a part of the other party, you're probably not going to go announcing that. So, but how other people see us or the identities that they assign to us, can be, part of it is determined by us and how we want to be seen. So like if I wear a wedding ring, I'm assigning myself as married. Or if I wear like a certain, like who's on your shirt? Okay, so, if Bryn's wearing a Justin Bieber t-shirt, she's assigning herself as, a Bieber fan, or maybe it's ironic, I don't know. Whatever floats your boat. But she assigns that to herself, but then we kind of give that meaning and say, oh, well, we want to sit with her at the lunch table, or now she's a Bieber fan, maybe we don't. You can't sit with us. Oh, but it is Wednesday and you do have pink, so you might be fine. I've had like 6 calls during class today. I don't know why people are so intent on getting a hold of me. But they can be socially and politically determined. But that's just part of us putting people in boxes, right? We see someone and kind of automatically go, okay, well, woman, 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 man, woman, woman, man. Okay, we have assigned people those identities, those boxes. Doesn't mean that's how everyone identifies, but those are the boxes that we have assigned. If you go over to, how many of you guys are married? Just nobody's married in here? Okay, well, anyways, so here in the US, we wear our wedding ring on our left ring finger, right? Over in Eastern Europe, they wear it on their right. So if I go over to Russia and I have a ring on my right ring finger, then they're going to assume I'm married, even if I'm not, just because that's the, that is what society has said is an identifying mark of a married person. And of course, we're all subject to being pigeonholed or kind of pushed into certain boxes before we're even born, just based on when we're born, where we're born. So if you were born in America, if you ever travel overseas, then you will always have that box of, oh, well, they're an American. Even if you've been living in, Germany for 16 years, you were still born an American. So you're still within that box of other people are going to judge you by. And then, of course, we do try to ascribe other identities to ourselves, either through like the clothes we wear, who we associate with, stuff like that. The last one we're going to go off on today, or we're going to finish off on, is this one. So identity is changing or dynamic. So let me make a note of that. So slide 8. We are Wednesday. Okay. But they're dynamic, so they're always changing. They can change based on the social context or what's going on in society. Like we said, if you are, a member of a minority political party, you might not admit that all the time. Political forces, national forces, if you're in a nation that really looks down upon a certain group of people, so if you are, if you maybe are a Christian or an atheist and you go over to the Middle East, you might not really emphasize your religious identity depending on where you are. Because someone's probably not going to admit to being, a minority religion or a minority sexual orientation in a place where they will kill you for that in certain places. But, and then identities do change, especially over time. So, what's it mean in this case, for example, to be a woman? So Abby and I might have very different definitions of that. I'm sorry, I'm just picking on you because you're right in front of me. So it just, You know, maybe her ideal is, you know, being a wife and mother. Maybe Bryn's ideal is wife and mother and professional because she wants to have it all. But it, you know, that's definitely changed throughout time. Obviously, the identity of a woman 200 years ago is very different than what it is now, and it's very different now. Well, it's very different here than what it is, let's say, in China or Saudi Arabia or Bangladesh. Okay, so we are wrapping that up. Do you guys have any questions? I know I kind of went over that a little quickly and I was probably talking fast, but it's just, I was looking at it and I realized like this is going to take us forever on Friday if we don't start. So yeah, I hate it when people identify bartenders as flirts or whores. It's like, just because someone does a specific job doesn't mean they're trying to sleep with you.